Hey, it's Luke without a darts. Today we're going to show you how to assemble the Fire Rat. Fire Rat's really cool, sidearm blaster, mag fed, and fun fact, you can also use Worker Nightingale magazines with a small modification of adding a second catch. This blaster does come in 2 different boxes, so it requires assembly, so that's something to know right off the bat. And it's definitely a more complicated assembly than simply attaching 2 halves, as I've seen referenced online. Tools and materials required to do this job include a mallet. You could probably get away with a hammer, but a mallet is handy. You will need a 2mm pin punch, or slightly smaller could do. You could also use an old Nerf motor, which is also 2mm in the shaft diameter. You'll need a 2.5mm hex key, a 2mm hex key, a pair of tweezers. You might be able to get away with a small pair of pliers, but probably tweezers would be better. And then something to apply super lube or axle grease. And then additionally, you'll need some actual super lube. We do not recommend buying this much. And you'll need some silicone lubricant. This is our slug slime from Captain Slug himself. And you'll need a towel of some sort, preferably not one you like. And let's get going. So first you're going to go ahead and unpack everything. You've got 2 boxes. Here we've got the grip and the main body, along with some hardware. And next we've got all the internals and the top slide and the barrel, along with the magazine. I took the time to put everything in a little bin here to make sure nothing rolls away, especially with these itty bitty springs. They are so small. First we're going to take the main assembly here and we're going to remove the back prime. We're going to pull out the pusher, and then we're going to remove the front muzzle, removing this ring and the main block here. It's worth noting that some of these have come slightly unassembled. If you do need to either replace the spring or yours is partially assembled, there's a little tab up here. If you push that down, that will release the actual spring assembly, and that's how you would actually swap your spring here. To put it back together, simply put it back, slide everything up. You're going to want to line up the barrel through the front hole and the catch here through that hole. A little easier to do vertical, I think, than horizontal. You can see here the spring around the barrel tends to bind, and you've got to kind of work that barrel right into the center position, so it's, there we go. And then as you push this forward, you're going to lift that tab right here where my finger is, right there, and that should stop it in place. Now that we've got the catch locked in place, this tab up top, we're going to slide the front muzzle back on. This front muzzle needs to go around the actual red plunger tube as pictured here. So when yeah, you'll see there are little cutouts here for it, and you'll see they'll go nest around it. And you can replace this front little muzzle as well. Make it all orange. Next, we're going to take our 2 giant long screws here and our M2.5mm driver, and we're going to insert these through the front. These lock the whole blaster together and hold everything in place. As with all mods, you very rarely have to put the wrench in this position. You're going to put far too much torque on those screws. Just thumb tight. Moving back over to the actual body, we're going to remove this plug back here. You can set that aside for now. And we're going to install the trigger. Now before we install the trigger, there are 2 tiny springs, the longer one that are in your kit, and they have got to be inserted down inside the body here. There are 2 square stops here, and there's a channel, and this is where your springs are going to end up. Now, in order to get those springs to actually stay put while you're assembling them, you're going to need to use a little bit of either axle grease, or in this case, we'll use some super lube to actually kind of hold them in place while we set our trigger on top of that channel. Opposite orientation, obviously. So I'll try to show you this the best I can, but I'm going to take a blob like that on the end. And all I'm doing is using that super lube to temporarily adhere that to the right spot where I want it. I apologize, this is definitely a tricky one to show on camera. Alternatively, you can just kind of try rest it in the channel and then slide it down. I was actually able to do that with a pinky. Little tricky, but essentially this is the placement where they should sit when you're done. There are 2 flat surfaces, the only flat surfaces that face this way. And just to show you from the side, this is where the springs are. And the flat stops are on this back side. After that, you're going to carefully insert the trigger past where it needs to go and then bring it back. And this plate will go flat down and actually hold those springs in place. Now you're not trying to put any pressure on these springs yet, because until the rest of the assembly is in there, you don't want those springs to pop up. But this is what it should look like after you've got those installed. I'm hopeful you can see this clearly on the camera here, but it looks like you can. So they should be completely flush. But don't compress them and try not to move it at this point. Next, we're going to assemble the slide lock, which is a really cool feature of this blaster. When you are out of darts, you can't fire, and it'll make it very obvious. So first I'm going to take and hold this piece, much easier to do on a surface, but I wanted to make sure we could show you the detail of this spring. I'm going to put a little bit of super lube on the end of this. Again, just that same trick to hold it in place. I probably used a little more than I need to, but it'll be just fine. Please note the spring here needs to stay at the top of the channel because it engages this small tab over here. There we go. You can set that off to the side carefully. Next, we're going to actually take the slide and insert it into the body, but we have to be very careful that we don't displace the springs and the trigger. So you're going to, with this hand, you're going to hold the blaster and slightly, just carefully pull down on the trigger. Now, keep in mind you have to keep that whole thing flat, so you're sort of pulling down in the corner and putting a little bit of rotational force on this to keep that in place. I'm hoping that makes sense. Then we're going to take our slide. You may need to pinch the ends of this to sort of get them started. Tip this down slightly and gently work this towards the back. These tabs here need to be just slightly pinched to get inside. There we go. Next, we're going to actually put our slide lock in place. Now, it's actually installed on the other side of the shell, so if we flip this around, you'll see the hole that it's going to go through. So that's going to go through this hole, but to install it, we want to do it from this orientation. And so what I'm going to do is, that's backwards where it's going to face. I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to drop that in place carefully, probably with my other hand. Showing this is nearly impossible. Once you've got it in place, it should sit below this ridge here. I can just barely show this. And don't flip the blaster over at this point or it will pop out. Next, we're going to hold on to that part we just inserted, and we're going to push the rest of the assembly back. Continue holding that part in place. I've got my index finger just sitting inside, and we're going to swap positions on the actual catch here. And what I'm doing is I'm going to push down on this small tab here and kind of pull up on that simultaneously, and that will swap them in positions, allowing that trigger to go all the way forward, and then we can finish inserting the entire slide assembly. At that point, you can let go of the slide lock, so we are secure back there. Now we're going to install these two pins right here and here. They are two pins that are close to the same size, but one is slightly longer. The longer one goes in the top, and the shorter one goes in the bottom. And I'm going to put this on top of a piece of cloth so I'm not marring my table or my parts there. And then we're just going to gently hammer these down into position. They should not require a lot of force until the end. Then I'm going to take my punch or my motor and do the final tap to get these to actually hold in place. Next, we're going to take these 4 screws, and there are 2 slightly longer ones and 2 slightly shorter ones. We're going to put the 2 shorter ones in the back and the 2 longer ones in the front. So starting with the longer ones, we'll put one right here, and this is using your 2mm hex driver. Repeat for the other side. And then the 2 shorter ones right at the plunger tube. Next, we're going to take the grip block here, this little translucent piece, and you're going to kind of spread these 2 open to just insert it back to where it goes, and it will line up with this hole here. Then we can take our largest pin and put that down through and tap that into place as well. Next, we'll take our pusher and we will install that in the back. It needs to line up with 2 different sets of holes. There are holes here for screws, and the second set of holes is here for a pin. I'm going to start by installing the screws first. Again, this is an M2 Allen key. At this point, you should have 3 pins remaining. You're going to take the shortest of the 3, and we're going to install that here, same way we did the other pins. Important to make sure you've got support on the other side here. Since this doesn't sit perfectly flush, I'm just folding over a little bit of this to make sure I've got it sitting on something before tapping that final. Very important is this pin has got to be completely flush on both sides, so if you go too far, like I just did in assembly, you're just going to need to tap it back and start over or reset it. It's got to be perfectly smooth here. Lastly, we're going to take our top slide and slide it in place. And you can probably guess what's going on here. You've got 2 more pins. They are the same size, 1 in each hole. And that's it, you've got the blaster assembled. Now, you might be saying, but Luke, why are there 2 pins still left here? Those pins are for this front here, and Greg, through his discovery here and testing in the warehouse, has realized that if you put those pins in, you're not going to get the blaster open again to swap springs and things. Since we've got these 2 long screws from the front holding the whole body together, we don't see any reason to actually put those in, so you can put those in if you like, or don't if you don't like. I'm going to leave mine out because I certainly want to be able to upgrade and swap around springs as I feel like it in the future. Last thing to do is actually test prime and fire the blaster, and we are working great. Actually, we'll put a dart through it while we're at it. Now, if you want to get a close picture of what I did to my Worker angled Nightingale magazine, here you can see the very minor modification I made. It seems to have no interference with the actual dart heads as they feed, and still allows it to work on regular Nightingale mag wells. So I think that's pretty cool. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions about the ZWQ S200 Fire Rat, please leave a comment down below and we'll do our best to get back to you. Also, if you're one of our customers and have a question about putting your blaster together or have any issues, email us orders@outofdarts at any time. Until next time, I'm Out of Darts.